April 15, 2020. The northern Persian Gulf. 11 Iranian Revolutionary Guard fast attack boats begin harassing a group of American naval vessels, closing to within 50 yards. Half a football field. For an hour, radio warnings go unanswered. And at the center of the encounter sits the strangest target Iran could have picked. A warship that looks, at first glance, like a commercial oil tanker. It is not. It is the USS Lewis B. Puller, an expeditionary sea base, and it holds position until the Iranian boats finally withdraw. They left that morning knowing exactly as much about what was inside that hull as they knew when they arrived. Nothing. Over the next 4 years, Iran would find out the hard way. Start with the number, because the number explains why this ship exists at all. In 2019, the Navy signed a contract with General Dynamics NASSCO worth $1.08 billion for the next 2 expeditionary sea bases. That works out to roughly $540 million per ship. For comparison, a San Antonio-class amphibious warship runs about $2 billion. Analysts estimate the ESB delivers around 70% of that capability at a quarter of the cost. The Navy built 6 of them, and the last one was delivered in 2026. 6 floating bases for less than the price of 2 traditional amphibious warships. That is not a procurement detail. That is the reason there is always one of these ships operating within helicopter range of Iran, year after year without ever going home. But to understand why the Navy wanted a ship like this in the first place, you have to go back to a problem that has nothing to do with shipbuilding. The problem was real estate. For decades, American operations in the Middle East depended on land bases and the political goodwill that came with them, and by the 2010s, both were getting harder to guarantee. Host nations could restrict what launched from their soil. Fixed runways sat inside the range rings of Iranian ballistic missiles. The Navy had already improvised one answer, the USS Ponce, a 40-year-old amphibious ship converted in 2012 into an interim floating staging base for the Persian Gulf, supporting mine countermeasures helicopters and special operations forces. The Ponce proved the concept. It also proved the concept deserved better than a hull built during the Vietnam War. So the Navy asked a different question. Instead of converting an old warship, what if you started with a commercial design the industry already knew how to build fast and cheap? The answer was the Alaska-class crude oil carrier, a proven double-hulled tanker design. At the NASSCO shipyard in San Diego, that tanker became something else. The first 2 hulls were built as expeditionary transfer docks for moving cargo at sea. The third was redesigned from the keel up as a floating base, and in 2015 the Navy gave the type its own name, Expeditionary Sea Base. The result is 785 feet long, 164 feet across the beam, and roughly 90,000 tons at full load. Bigger than most cruise ships, nearly as heavy as a nuclear carrier. A diesel-electric plant pushes it past 15 knots with a range of 9,500 nautical miles, which means it can cross an ocean and then simply stay month after month without touching a pier. It carries no vertical launch cells, no heavy gun mounts, no towering radar arrays. From a distance, the profile reads as civilian. What matters is stacked inside, in layers, and each layer answers a different question about how you fight a war from a ship that pretends to be a tanker. The top layer is the flight deck, 52,000 square feet of reinforced steel, one of the largest flight decks in the entire Navy, with 4 landing spots sized for the heaviest rotary aircraft in the American inventory, CH-53E Super Stallions, MH-60 Seahawks, MV-22 Ospreys, even Army AH-64 Apache attack helicopters, which qualified aboard the Puller in March 2020, 1 month before those Iranian boats came within 50 yards of it. Think about what that qualification means. Army gunships, operating from a Navy hull in a naval theater? A hangar shelters 2 more aircraft. This ship launches no jets, but for helicopters, tilt rotors, and drones, it functions like a small, anonymous aircraft carrier that never appears in the headlines. 1 level down is the reason the Navy calls this class a base instead of a ship. The mission deck, about 65,000 square feet of open, reconfigurable space designed around standardized shipping containers. What does a Navy do with 65,000 square feet of open steel inside a warship? Anything it wants? The containers are modular mission packages. load command and control suites, and the deck becomes a special operations headquarters. Load mine warfare modules, and it becomes the control center for clearing a shipping lane. Load drone stations, medical facilities, weapons storage, berthing pods. Swap the containers between deployments, and the ship transforms without a shipyard ever touching it. One hull rebuilt from the inside, over and over. Cranes rated for 11 metric tons put small boats and unmanned craft into the water in conditions that would shut smaller ships down. And forward of all this, the superstructure holds the military heart. Armories, explosive ordnance magazines, a tactical command center connected across an entire theater, mission planning spaces, and a flight briefing room. Then there is the crew, because the crew is its own kind of engineering. An ESB runs on a hybrid model that exists almost nowhere else in the fleet. About 44 civilian mariners from Military Sealift Command run the ship itself. Navigation, engineering, maintenance. Roughly 100 Navy sailors run the missions. Flight operations, weapons, force protection. And the berthing spaces hold room for 250 more embarked personnel, SEALs, Marines, explosive ordnance disposal teams, whoever the mission requires. Merchant marine tradition and military discipline. Working the same ship. The arrangement cuts personnel costs, and it enables the single most important thing about this class. The ship never has to come home. The hull stays in theater permanently while crews rotate through roughly every 5 months. The ship stays. The people swap. If a converted oil tanker that swaps missions the way a port swaps containers, at a quarter the price of a real amphibious warship, changes how you think about naval power, hit that subscribe button. Because everything to this point is the brochure. What follows is what this ship has actually done to Iran. It started with a message delivered in the form of a ceremony. In August 2017, in Bahrain, the Navy commissioned the Lewis B. Puller into active service. The first time in American history, a warship was commissioned outside the United States. The location was the point. Commissioning the ship in the Persian Gulf, 500 miles from the Iranian coast, told Tehran that this was not a visitor. It was a permanent address. The commissioning also changed the ship's legal status. As a warship rather than a support vessel, the Puller could conduct direct combat operations under the law of armed conflict. Iran now had a neighbor that looked like a tanker, was armed like a base, and had the legal standing of a destroyer. Then the neighbor went to work. December 2022, the Gulf of Oman. Boarding teams operating with the Puller intercept a stateless smuggling vessel and find more than 1 million rounds of 7.62mm ammunition. Iranian origin, bound for the Houthis in Yemen. Every round is seized. Then the story takes a turn Tehran never modeled. In 2023, the United States government transferred that captured ammunition to Ukraine. Iranian bullets, taken at sea by a ship that looks like a tanker, were redirected to a battlefield in Eastern Europe to be fired at Iran's ally. Somewhere in that chain of events is a lesson about what happens when your smuggling route runs past a floating base that never leaves. On January 11th, 2024, in the Arabian Sea off Somalia, Navy SEALs launch from the Puller for a night boarding operation, with helicopter and drone support overhead. Their target is another vessel, this one carrying ballistic and cruise missile components, propulsion systems, guidance packages, warheads, all bound for the Houthis, who were attacking commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The SEALs board in rough seas and seize everything. The vessel is sunk. The cost is real. 2 SEALs are lost during the operation, and the Navy searches for 10 days before declaring them deceased. The components never arrive, and when the crisis was not Iranian at all, the ship was still there. During the Afghanistan withdrawal in late 2021, the Puller took station in the Arabian Sea, staged equipment as the security situation collapsed, and integrated with the Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group during one of the most chaotic evacuations in American history. Notice the pattern across all of it. Not one of these operations required a carrier strike group to surge across an ocean. The ship was already there. It had been there since 2017. 9 years, 1 hull, no homecoming. A carrier announces its arrival weeks in advance, and satellites track it from the day it leaves port. The Expeditionary Sea Base removes that entire warning cycle. It is simply present, every day, close to whatever Iran does next. Which brings us to the reason this ship matters more right now than at any point in its 9 years on station. This summer, the confrontation in the Strait of Hormuz hardened into a blockade, and the geography of that fight is brutal. The strait is 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest, and the usable shipping corridor is far thinner. Iran's tools of choice in that corridor are cheap and numerous. Fast attack boats, drones, and naval mines. Mines are the nightmare. They cost thousands of dollars, they can shut down a $1 trillion trade artery, and clearing them is slow, dangerous work that requires helicopters, unmanned vessels, sweeping equipment, and a nearby platform to launch and command all of it. There is no allied port conveniently located inside the danger zone. There does not need to be. The mine countermeasures mission was the founding purpose of this class, the job the Ponce improvised and the Puller inherited. The unremarkable-looking ship is the floating infrastructure of exactly this fight. Staging attack helicopters, hosting the mine warfare command modules, feeding small boats and unmanned systems into a contested lane just miles wide, without a single foreign base agreement, while the expensive warships keep their missiles for the threats that actually justify the cost. And the class is still becoming something else. NASSCO has proposed configuring expeditionary sea bases as drone motherships, command hubs for swarms of unmanned surface and aerial vehicles, controlled from containerized stations on that 65,000 square foot mission deck. No new hull design required. Swap the containers and the ship transforms again. The class was designed for a 40-year service life, which means these hulls will still be operating off somebody's coast in the 2060s, running missions that have not been invented yet. So consider the view from the other side of the water, because that is the view that explains the title of this video. If you were an Iranian commander, which would worry you more? The $13 billion aircraft carrier you can track by satellite from the moment it leaves Virginia? Or the $540 million ship shaped like a tanker that has operated in your backyard for 9 years that rebuilds itself below deck where no satellite can see? Whose mission this month? Special operations, mine clearance, drone command you cannot determine from the outside, and that has already taken your ammunition, your missile parts, and your patrol boat's best attempt at intimidation without giving up an inch? Deterrence is usually loud. This is the other kind. Iran's problem is not the warship it can see. It is the one it cannot read. The Navy's most expensive ships make headlines. This one makes Tehran guess. And after 9 years of guessing wrong, that is what nervous looks like.